Welcome to the podcast about stories from the center of the universe. I'm Daniel Lance.
I'm Paul Gilman, and this is Podso 1.
Dr. Brandon Nunnally is an emergency room doctor. In our conversation, we discuss Brandon's med school experience, including the insane amount of work required, the misconceptions that some people have, and the type of people that succeed in the med school environment. He went to Randolph-Macon College for undergrad, then UVA for medical school, and finally University of Pittsburgh for his residency. He also tells us about his role as an ER doc, including the physically intensive 12-hour shifts, how crucial it is for him to stay professional and calm in chaotic and emotional environments, and all the awesome supporting staff roles that keep the ER running like a well-oiled machine. Finally, we talk about what COVID has changed in the ER setting, and Brandon addresses a question that he gets a lot, which is whether he has ever been pressured to list COVID as a cause of death for his patients. So without further ado, here is Dr. Brandon Nunnally. Brandon Nunnally, welcome to Podso 1.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Brandon's
glad to have you.
Brandon, I think you feel a little bit like you're on another planet right now, maybe.
A little bit. It's all new to me.
It's all good. It was new to us a year ago. In fact, I had never listened to a podcast about 15 months ago. I didn't know what they were really.
Yeah, and now you slam Rogan every day.
Yeah. And so we should mention it to our 42 listeners that we met Brandon through Brandon's childhood friend, Lindsay Greenwood. Lindsay happens to be a neighbor of mine, and she knew about the podcast, and she said, "Oh, you've got to talk to Brandon." I'm like, "What's the deal with Brandon?" So she told us all about you. I'm like, "Oh, of course, yeah, man. He's an ER doctor, and he sounds like a cool dude. So why wouldn't we talk to him?" Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, we grew up together. We said played together as toddlers. Families still very close, good friends. So
yeah, and she literally, you could go see her. Is she going to be mad at you if you don't swing by on the way out?
I'm not sure.
Might be a little late.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But they've known each other a really long time.
That's true. And, I've heard that ER docs sometimes have crazy hours. Like, is that...
Yeah, hours are all over the place. It definitely benefit of having the shift work and this set schedule, but, it goes all over the place. I just work 3 night shifts earlier in the week, and then I'm starting back on morning shifts tomorrow. So, something's open 24/7, 365 days out of the year. It doesn't really change.
You always got to have somebody in there.
Yep, always got to have it staffed.
So when you say night shift, is that like all the way through the night?
Yeah, it depends on the ER, but typically they'll start at 7 p.m., anywhere from 7 to 10 p.m. and run until 7 a.m. the next morning, so straight through the night.
Wow.
So brutal 12-hour shifts typically.
Yeah, depending on the place, anywhere from 8 to 12-hour shifts.
Yeah.
There's some more rural ERs where you can find 24-hour shifts, but I wouldn't really want to do more than a 12-hour shift personally.
Dang.
Yeah.
Have you pulled a 24?
I have not. In residency we did, but
it's brutal.
Not. Yeah, working straight for 24 hours is rough.
Are you effective in hour 23?
It depends on how busy it was, and if I got an hour nap or 30-minute nap, I can usually recharge and push through. And depends on how much caffeine is readily available.
Yeah, wow, that sounds completely unrealistic to work 24.
Yeah, it's a little surreal when you get in that deep and you realize how long you've been there. But typically, it's so busy, the time really does kind of fly by when you're there. So it doesn't feel like it's 12, 24 hours. It goes by pretty quick.
That's awesome.
Nice. All right, so where'd you grow up exactly in Richmond?
So grew up on the west end of Richmond, as most of my childhood years by Godwin High School.
Okay. And
then when I was in high school, we moved out just inside Goochland County, so down River Road, and went to St. Christopher's all throughout from junior kindergarten through senior year.
Junior K, which I didn't know was a thing.
Huh. Yeah, it was a 14-year lifer there.
It's a real investment by your parents.
Yeah. I didn't obviously appreciate it at the time, but now that I've started to look into schools for my son, I realize how much of a commitment and sacrifice they made.
I mean, it's I for the record, I also went to St. Christopher's, and when I was going there in the mid '80s, it was not super expensive. I mean, it was, relatively speaking, it was not nothing, but how much it costs now, I can't comprehend that.
Yeah, that was a kindergarten cost. It kind of blew my mind when I saw the price tag.
Like, are they learning how to squeeze coal and turn it into diamonds in there? What's going on? That's good times. So what are your fondest memories of growing up?
I try to think things specific. family vacations. I mean, just, nothing crazy. I like the kind of simple stuff. Just going to the beach for a week with the family, running a beach house and having the whole family there, grandparents, family, little sister, just kind of hanging out for the week. In high school, we went on a couple other, international trips that were pretty memorable.
Nice.
But for the most part, just I think some of the best memories are just those kind of simple family vacations.
Where's the coolest place you ever went? As a kid.
As a kid, so I didn't go. I never left the country until I was in high school. But as a little kid, I think to me the coolest trip was going to Disney World. We'd get in my granddad's big conversion van. It had a TV and a VHS player.
Oh,
and
nice.
I'd sit in the back. We'd watch VHS tapes the whole way down to Disney World.
Your family had it figured out.
Right? Yeah. They rented the conversion van. We'd drive all night, and it was it felt like one big party.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great as a kid.
Yeah, my cousins had one of those, and we didn't. Like the little thing that flips down,
yeah.
You can watch the movies. I was so jealous.
They don't make them anymore. You can't find those anymore.
Yeah, I guess because everybody has their own little screen in their hand at all times.
Right.
So
who knew?
Who knew? Did
you play sports growing up?
I did, yeah. I started off like every other little kid playing Little League baseball and football at Kanawha. And,
you're a Kanawha kid.
Yeah, I played at Kanawha.
I'm an Ashland Viking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Remember playing against you guys?
K-A-N.
Oh, this is going to be fun. You're going to try to spell it?
A-W-H-A. I've seen the signs for it. I just didn't know how you pronounced it.
Kanawha.
Kanawha.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Sorry, you were going to ask a question.
No, I don't think it was.
Yeah.
You were talking about Kanawha football. And
yeah.
when that field at Kanawha back in the day, the end zone actually went into the woods.
Yeah.
There were trees in the end zone.
Yep.
Was it still like that when you were playing?
The trees were right at the end of the end zone where I played.
They were in the end zone when we played there. Like, what happens if a kid runs into one of those? What happens? Do you get points? Do you have points to track that? I didn't understand it.
Those were good memories. I feel like, it was as a kid, there was real football, as even Pee Wee. They put the pads on. You were taking each other out.
Right.
I'm not sure if they let them get credit, quite as aggressive these days.
They're a lot safer these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in the day when we wore leather helmets, it was a lot more aggressive than it is today.
Yeah, I think we were I was still a young child, and we were in the playoffs, and I remember at halftime the coach coming by and spraying this sticky hands on our hands at the halftime to try to give us a little bit of an edge. I'm like, looking back, I'm sure that's probably not legal, but
I'm pretty sure it was illegal, but whatever. If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Yeah, we're like 10 years old,
Yeah, well, and back in the day, and how old are you?
34.
You're 34. I'm 52. And it sounds like it was true for you too. Like, coaches were really intense.
Oh yeah, even at that age.
They wanted, and as a father now, and my son's 19, I'm like, I don't want him banging his head that hard into things.
Yeah.
I didn't even give it a second thought when I was.
Oh yeah, they would do the sideline tackling drills where you just line up at each other and just run head on and just I remember that was in high school, but I remember specifically getting knocked out several times and never leaving the game. No concussion protocol. That wasn't around when I was playing either. So it was like, all right, are you hurt or injured, and can you get back in the game? All right.
Yeah, I got the same thing. I got basically the doctor asked me if I was nauseous,
right,
and I said a little bit, and then he didn't actually say this, but he basically said rub some dirt on it, kind of thing, and I'm like, okay. But I did not go back in because I didn't remember like an hour and a half of the game. So yeah, and being knocked out several times, and now you're a doctor, like you got to wonder what you were thinking back then.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just every other kid was playing football, and they told me it was going to be okay, so I just got up, brushed it off, and kept playing.
And you have a son now. How old is your son?
2.
And so, are you going to let him play football?
I think I would. I think I would.
Are you going to push him to play football?
I don't think I would push him, but he's already showing a lot of interest in sports, and he wants to watch football on TV. We started playing soccer league with him, and it's kind of funny. My dad has been letting him watch rugby. So when we take him to soccer practice, he wants to play rugby. So he runs and picks up the ball and starts tackling the other kids.
Granddad's not helping.
Yeah, and the other kids happen to all be girls on his team. So he's the only boy, and he's tackling all the little girls on the team.
Oh, man. That's funny.
Yep.
Well, at that age, they just run around in little groups, right?
Yeah. They don't know what's going on.
Well, the ones that are paying attention to the ball, just all of them gather around the ball, and then there are 2 kids picking little daisies or whatever.
And then one of them cries, and they all start crying.
And then as a parent, you're like, what are we doing here? But because how old were you when you first played organized sports?
I wasn't that young. I can't remember specifically, but I was probably maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I don't think we did anything younger than that.
It was 8 back in the day for me.
Yeah.
And so hearing a 2-year-old
Yeah,
play
like organized
soccer,
sports. Yeah.
I mean, what can you play an organized sport when they can't walk? When they're
Right.
when they're
yeah,
just
when
crawling
they're-
around?
Yeah.
Since we brought your son up, what's his name?
Benjamin.
Okay, nice. Very nice. And do you call him Benjamin or do you call him Ben?
We usually just call him Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot simpler.
Yeah, it's take that syllable off.
It's efficient for sure. Very cool. So, what positions you play in football?
So it's actually offensive line. I played center
Really?
all throughout. Yeah. I don't know why. Because I guess when I was younger, I was on the bigger side.
Okay.
And then into high school, I was actually a little bigger than I am now in high school, but was still relatively small for O lineman to be 200, 210 pounds.
Right.
But it worked out in high school because most of the teams we played had a 4-man front, so they needed someone a little smaller and quicker to go cut off linebackers.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out to
Okay.
have a slightly smaller, quicker center.
Did you choose center or did a coach kind of steer you there?
A coach steered me there in Little League football. It was Pee Wee football, and they got me playing center, and it just kind of stuck, and I enjoyed it, and I kind of like being the small guy. And
Yeah. So I played quarterback, and I bring that up because the center and quarterback have a very important relationship. Did you find it strange that the normal hike? Was that weird for you? Seriously.
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're like a kid, you're like, well, this is a little odd, but
What's the normal hike?
Oh, so Daniel's an international guy, and so he doesn't have a full appreciation for. We don't need to be too graphic, but let's just say centers are. I don't know. Do you want to take a shot at this?
I don't know. You get pretty close with the quarterback,
We'll give you more detail off recording. How about that?
Okay, excellent. It has something to do with the whole bending over and passing it back between your legs.
But yes.
Okay.
And
They keep it real tight under there.
Yeah.
you don't want to fumble. That's good
I
times.
think I follow. Okay.
All right, so then you went to Randolph-Macon, and as a Richmond guy, you didn't go far from home. What was the attraction to Randolph-Macon?
No, I had originally thought I wanted to go to a bigger school. I wanted to, growing up, going through high school, actually wrestling turned into be kind of my main sport. I liked football, but was always a little small, and had thought I wanted to go to college and wrestle. But by the end of going into senior year, I realized I was kind of done with it, with the weight cutting and everything. So I didn't really have any interest in doing that in college. And I thought I wanted to go to a big school, but having come from a small high school, when I went to some of the bigger schools on tours, I felt a little overwhelmed. I felt like a kind of a statistic, and just it was just a little overwhelming coming from such a small school growing up. So when I went to Randolph-Macon, touring there just felt like home. It felt like being back at St. Christopher's. I felt like it was very personalized. A lot of the offices are in small houses. Everyone kind of knew your name when you walked onto campus. And that really stood out to me. I kind of wanted to be in that environment for college. So
That's cool. Did you know Barclay Dupriest?
Oh yeah, I know her very well.
What's her reputation there?
Oh, I mean, she pretty much runs the school. I don't think anyone goes to that school and doesn't get to know Barclay. I mean, she knows everybody there.
She has a giant personality.
She does.
I grew up a block away from her.
Oh, and her husband Rob is awesome.
He's an awesome dude.
So I know him very well. My grandparents were very close with them, and my cousin was best friends with Tad. He played football with Tad, and was very close with Tad.
What's your cousin's name?
George Bland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so he went to Macon, and they were going to go to Macon together, I believe.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the accident. But,
Yeah, Tad played football and baseball his freshman year at Macon. And
and
then
then George went there the following year. My cousin.
Yeah,
we were
brutal.
a year behind. Yeah.
Awful time. It's actually, I think, the third time Tad Dupriest has come up on.
Oh, really? Wow.
I grew up with Tad. I mean, I
Yeah.
played backyard football, wiffle ball,
Yeah.
all kinds of things. And his charity that his friends started is still going.
Yeah, the golf tournament.
They do a golf
every year.
tournament, and
Yeah.
I think an oyster thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I did the golf tournament once. It was a lot of fun.
All right, so let's go back to wrestling.
Okay.
The line I use with wrestlers is you weren't good enough to play basketball, and that's why you wrestled.
Yeah,
But
too
that's
short to play basketball.
that's usually not. Sometimes there's a little truth to that,
Yeah.
but there's something about the individual endeavor that really
Yeah.
some people gravitate to. Why did you gravitate to it?
I had never. No one in my family had never mentioned wrestling. Never even knew that it was a thing, and really until middle school, I had never even thought of it until 8th grade. And you had to do 3 sports at St. Christopher's as mandatory athletics. I'm sure it was for you.
was
I
back
mean,
in the day.
mandatory sports. So I knew that, at that time I was playing lacrosse also. So I knew I was going to do football. I knew I was going to do lacrosse. And I had to do something in the winter. So I was like, well, I'm too slow for track. I'm too short for basketball. Let's just do wrestling.
Yeah.
And it ended up just kind of clicking. And we got a new coach in there my 8th grade year who was absolutely phenomenal and went from kind of a mediocre wrestling program to my freshman year winning states. And then we won all 4 years.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, we won every single year I was there.
We should mention your coach's name since he was so prolific.
Yeah, it was Pete Schaefer.
Okay.
And
nice.
he took us from mediocre to really a national powerhouse. I mean, we were
national.
Yeah, but we were finishing top 10 in the nationals.
What?
By my senior year.
What weight did you wrestle your senior year?
So freshman year I was 140. Junior and sophomore and junior I was 152. And senior year I was 171.
That's 171's where the bad boys are. Typically.
It was tough. It was a really tough weight class. But I think I finished my junior and senior year. Unfortunately, I finished as runner-up at states in my weight class.
Yeah.
There's one guy that I could
There's
not
always
beat.
one guy. There's always
both
one.
years I could not beat him. Lost by like 2 points, I think, both years, and so have to live with that silver medal.
That's soul crushing.
Forever.
During the moment for sure.
Yeah, but our team won every year, and I think my senior year we set a new record as far as biggest deficit. We won it by so many points. I think we could have stopped wrestling halfway through the second day and still won the entire tournament.
So what's the magic with Coach Schaefer?
He was just, I mean, he was so intense and so, I don't know the best way to describe it, but I think the coaches he brought into that program and the way he kind of trained us, I mean, he really treated it more like a college level program. I mean, we were there, like, and this is a different era. I don't think this would really function or even be allowed these days, but I mean, we were practicing before school. I would get a workout in during lunch some days, and then I would go in and we'd work out in the evening until, it was late.
Oh, wow.
And Christmas break was the same way. I mean, we'd be there every morning over Christmas break. We got one day off and it was Christmas Day, and that was it. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, every other day we were in there busting it. But he had buy-in from the team, so that was what made it so special is we were all there. And we saw what that hard work was getting us. When you're getting national recognition, when you're beating every public school team in the region. I mean, we took down at pretty much every public school in the Richmond area. I remember Lee Davis was kind of the bad boys of wrestling when we were there.
Yeah.
And my junior year, they actually canceled the match with us. They made up some reason, but we thought it was because they knew what was going to happen. And then
bunch of prep school kids.
Yeah,
are about to come
and
in
the
here
Times
and crush
Dispatch,
us.
they were very biased. They always kept Lee Davis number 1 and St. Chris number 2.
Yeah, because there were people at the paper that probably didn't like the prep school kids.
And then finally our senior year, they came and we just absolutely dominated them. And then they finally put us as number 1 in the Central region.
I wish I had known you back then. You could have invited me to watch that because I would have loved to have watched that.
It was a lot of fun. It was good. So I think when you saw that success, you were willing to do the work.
And you were going through it together too,
yeah,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it just kind of taught us, in the classroom too. I mean, just what hard work can get you and what sacrifice can really do for you.
Yeah.
And we all bought into it. And he had a great program. And they're still a very good wrestling program. I don't think quite as dominant, but they've done really well even ever since he left.
Oh, he did leave.
He did eventually. He got another coaching job, I think closer to where he was from, in the Northeast.
He could go wherever he wanted, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think at that point he had a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Was there anything in particular at the beginning that helped with the buy-in before you started to see the success? Like, was there anything that helped with everybody actually getting more committed to the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think he really made a point to work on the younger people because I mean I think some of the older guys that were in the program, they weren't, when this new coach came in and was like, all right, we're going to go from being a normal program to we're going to bust it every day. Weren't a big fan of it. But I think when he kind of started cultivating us from the middle school age on, that really made the difference is he kind of built that from the foundation up. So then by the time we were juniors and seniors, that was just the expectation. If you were going to wrestle at St. Christopher's, this is how hard you're going to work. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to be the best. And there's no other option.
So he had that 4-year vision already.
When he came in and he said he's like, I'm going to come in and next year we're going to win the state championship. He knew how to do it, and he brought in a group of coaches and it just worked out. It was a really good experience.
What a baller! Yeah,
that's very cool. Go ahead. You want to talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Well, I'll just ask, have you ever thought about, you're already, due to the silver medals and stuff, you're already evidently a dangerous dude. So have you ever thought about trying other martial arts or anything like that?
I mean, knowing the things that I know now, I don't think I would ever do that stuff. But in high school, if like the MMA, if that existed, I absolutely would have. Would have jumped on that if that was a thing. I still love watching it. I mean, I think just knowing, I'm too old to do that stuff now, and starting to have injuries, and seeing in the ER, you're what happens to your body when you do some of those things. But when you're in ninth grade, you're invincible. You don't think anything can hurt you and stop you,
and tomorrow's tomorrow.
It's endless. Yep.
Yeah. So like striking sports where you're actually punch people in the face. Totally agree. But things like jiu-jitsu and even wrestling to an extent, there's a way to practice without it being like you're not breaking each other's arms or
for sure
doing stuff like that. So there's some people I know who are doing jiu-jitsu that are like, well progressed in years. So I guess there's a way to.
He's trying to sell you on it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I love it whenever a jiu-jitsu. So whenever a wrestler walks into the jiu-jitsu gym because they put on the white belt and everybody thinks they're brand new, but then like they already have such good instinct about like how to use their body weight and how to manipulate that they like crush all the other white belts, so it's really funny. And like, you can tell me like that guy's a wrestler, cause they just pin the guy on their back and it's like, all right, what do we do now?
Right.
So if you're ever looking for something to try, there's my pitch. All right, moving on.
Well, I mean, you're really into it. Like, we have to schedule podcast around your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I'm doing it virtually right now, but looking forward to getting back into it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Brandon, do you mind if we explore what virtual jiu-jitsu looks like? What does that mean?
It's so it's solo drills, which means you do things like break falls, shrimping. You like do motions. It's kind of like Tai Chi. You like pretend that your opponent is there, and you kind of just move your arms and legs.
Can your girlfriend video you the next time?
Well, I'm trying to get my girlfriend to be like a training partner.
She's not
ideally. She's not super into it. No.
All right, good times. So when did you know you wanted to be a doc?
Probably early on in college and maybe a little bit in high school. I didn't get the best grades in high school, just because I don't know. To me, I didn't have like a vision of what I necessarily wanted to do with my life. So I kind of had in high school, sports were my priority. Unfortunately, not grades. I didn't do badly, but I was kind of a solid like B minus student in high school. Mostly probably for lack of effort when I look back. More just because I was focused on, making sure I'm sleeping, eating, exercising, working out,
Right.
Wrestling came first and everything else kind of came second. But I think I knew that I was always interested in science. And I think in high school, the one class that I really enjoyed was biology. So I went into college knowing that I was interested in biology. And I think that was kind of the natural progression of, well, what can I do if I major in biology? And growing up, I was always interested in those weird true life doctor shows on TV that are just kind of gruesome and gory, but they're all reality kind of TV in the medical world. And even my parents told me that I was always I had a little science kid as a kid. Anything I could find outside that was dead, I would want to like dissect, and it's probably a little creepy, but I was just really interested in that stuff growing up. So I think going into college, I knew that was a potential, but I also knew that I was going to have to change my work habits a lot.
Right.
That if I wanted to do that, I was going to have to really buckle down and get serious. And I think going into college, I was able to kind of realize that it was something that I was interested in, and was able to, I guess, probably channel a lot of that work ethic that I had done into wrestling then into my schoolwork.
Right.
With the same kind of mentality of, well, if I sacrifice, I know I can do this and can accomplish it. So I didn't have the wrestling, but I was able to just kind of channel that and focus on the schoolwork and kind of flip a switch on the academic side.
So the freshman year of high school, the biology, the frog dissection, right? Was that still a thing?
Yeah, yep,
when you were
yep.
there? So
I loved it. Yeah.
You were the one kid in there. It's like, this is awesome.
Yeah, yep. I was
like, what is this?
There's always one.
Yeah. Yep.
So you ended up majoring in biology.
I did. Yeah, I stuck with the biology.
How many biology majors back when you graduated?
It wasn't a ton. I can't think. I mean, my class size was tiny. I mean, we maybe had like 250 students in my class.
Yeah, there's not that many kids in the whole school.
Yeah, it's a little bigger now, but we were like between 2 and 250, I think, in my class.
And like literally, 15 to 30 biology majors? Maybe?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably if that.
Yeah, there were probably like 1,000 big schools, right?
Oh yeah, big schools. Yeah, for sure.
So Did you love Randolph-Macon?
I did, yeah. I don't regret any of it. I enjoyed every second of being there. Joined a fraternity freshman year and KA and lived in the KA house for 3 years.
Tad was a KA.
Tad, yeah. So we got to see Barkley and Rob at all of the functions. They would come to
Oh, were they really?
and,
yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, so I lived in the fraternity house for all 3 years and was actually the president of the fraternity my senior year.
Nice.
So enjoyed that, but was able to still kind of focus on the schoolwork.
It's typically not conducive to
right,
schoolwork.
Yeah. I would have to leave the house. Getting any work done at home was not possible.
I lived in a fraternity for 2 years, and my dad said, "This is not going to work well for you."
Right.
And he was right.
Yep. Yeah, it was hard to kind of pull myself away, to walk through the crowd and be like, all right, gotta go to the library and study.
I mean, the chances of you being a doctor after not focusing in high school and then living in a fraternity for 3 years, you didn't take the easiest path. To med school.
I think people, when I told them that I was interested in going to medical school freshman year of college, I think people that I knew in high school were probably
like, that's adorable.
Right, exactly. I think most people probably thought it was a joke.
But you were serious, and you knew, and you knew once you focused, it was just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I just needed to have some guidance and figure out how to do it, just because no one in my family was in medicine, in science at all. So it was totally foreign for anybody in my family. So just finding a good mentor in college and having a good outline of how I need to get there was kind of crucial.
Was your mentor a professor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
You want to share his or her name?
Yeah. Dr. Foster was biology. He was my advisor and kind of mentored me the whole time.
Is he still there?
He's still there. Yeah.
Nice.
And I still stay in touch with him.
Very cool.
But they don't have when I was there, they didn't have a real formal pre-med program. They had kind of an interest track, but it wasn't a real kind of formal process. Whereas now they've got all sorts of pre-acceptance programs at various schools, and they have a really robust pre-med program now, which I was really happy to find out about.
That's great.
And they're actually going to be starting a PA school there too.
Really?
In the next 2 years.
That's going to be very popular.
Yep.
Wow. I know guys that became PAs by going through Green Beret 18 Delta training. It was the quickest way to do it. It's probably a brutal way to do it too.
Yeah.
So you told me where you went to med school? Is it MCV?
UVA.
You went to UVA.
Yep.
Okay, so the finest institution in the land.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, in the Commonwealth, of course.
No, in the country.
In the country. It took 2 years off, but.
What'd you do in those 2 years?
So I had to take the MCAT. First time didn't get the score I wanted to get, so I knew I needed to do a dedicated course. So I signed up for a prep class, and I had started working as a scribe actually in the ER in Petersburg. In undergrad, that was more so initially just to kind of confirm that I wanted to do medicine by getting some experience, and then I just kept doing it because I really liked working there, which probably also is what led me to my interest in working in the ER because I liked it so much. I knew that that's generally the direction I thought I wanted to go within medicine.
You knew that when? At what point?
When I started working there, probably junior year of college, I was like, well, if I actually get into medical school, then I know that I'm very interested in working in the emergency department. Obviously want to go with an open mind because there's a lot of options, but I kind of went in with a little bit of a bias towards emergency medicine.
So were you scribing in the ER?
I was, yeah. So at that point, it was a relatively new program, but we'd be hired by the physicians, and we would essentially follow them around and just do their documentation for them. We would take the notes when we would go into the rooms with them, which was a really awesome experience for a pre-med. Because you essentially you're stuck to their hip the entire shift. You see what they see, you do what they do, and the doctors that were really kind of in tune to knowing that we were interested would take the time to explain things to us and teach us a little bit. So it was a really cool experience.
Wow, that must have been wild. Were your shifts crazy then too, or?
They were, yeah. I worked for that first year off. I worked almost exclusively night shifts down there. So, and I think the shifts were 8 to 7 or 9 to 7 or something. So I would drive down there and then was doing a couple other odd jobs too. So I'd get off my night shift. I worked as a tutor, so I'd come home, go to the schools and tutor during the day.
The next day?
Yeah, a couple times. I would get off, go right into tutoring the next day.
Dang.
But and then then have a few days off, and then I was trying to study for the MCAT. So I wasn't really working a super crazy schedule. I was working a few days a week. And trying to dedicate most of the time for MCAT studying and just taking a few months off and just doing that.
So would you kind of do 72 straight hours of grind and then sleep for the next half of the week? Or...
So I wasn't working that much the year off. I mean, I've worked like 3 night shifts, so like maybe 30 hours, and then had like 4 days off where I would go essentially just to full-time studying and then still doing some tutoring stuff on the side.
So 4 days off would be like you'd still get sleep, but you'd just be studying when you were awake.
Right, I'd just be studying pretty much full-time.
Okay.
And kind of had a dedicated regimen where I made sure I had every Friday off, so that was my practice test day. I think I did like 10 full-length practice MCATs for like 10 weeks in a row.
Oh my god!
How long does the MCAT take?
Gosh, now it's different. I think when I did it, it was like 6.5 hours ish.
You did that 10 times?
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Every Friday was practice test day, and then Saturday was I would review the entire test, what I got wrong, why I got it wrong, and then Sunday was like the day off where I wouldn't do anything.
Now, no pressure. I understand if you want to be modest, but do you want to reveal your score?
No, you don't have to reveal your score.
It's kind of meaningless now because they changed the whole score system. I mean, at the time, I did okay on it. I mean, I got a 34 on it, but that's probably meaningless to anyone that's currently pre-med.
Or knows nothing about the
right.
MCAT.
I don't know anything about it either.
34 sounds amazing to us because
it does.
That's the first reveal.
Right.
Yeah.
First time
It's not nothing to brag about, but at the time it was good enough to open the door to most med schools. So.
Did you was UVA your number one choice?
It was. I think I never thought it was realistic at first when I first wanted to do it, because I knew, when I first decided I wanted to go to med school, I had really no expectations, and I knew that it was going to be kind of a long shot unless I obviously turned my grades around. But then I was able to get really good grades all through college. The first time I took the MCAT did not go so great, so I wasn't really setting the bar too high as far as where I wanted to go. I mean, medical school is typically one of those things that, you go where you get in. You usually don't, you don't want to be too kind of picky with it. You want to apply broadly and just take your shot and hope that it sticks somewhere. But in the back, once I got the second score and did a lot better, I knew places like UVA were a possibility still. I thought was a very big long shot. But as far as if I could have picked anywhere, I think that would have been where I wanted to go.
It's got a really
regardless.
good reputation.
It does. Yeah, it does. Mm-hmm.
For lots of endeavors to include medical school.
Right. Yeah.
So do you think that the grind, like the willingness to grind, or just raw intellectual ability, like would you kind of count one as more important than the other in terms of getting into med school and succeeding?
I mean, it's definitely, I think people out there on both sides of the spectrum, but I think, at least for me, it was more of the grind. Like I was not the naturally smart, didn't have to do anything. I mean, I went to go into St. Christopher's, you're around those people all the time, the people that are naturally smart, that do not have to really do anything and are going to get straight A's on everything they do. But for me, it was definitely needed to work hard to get to that point. And then in medical school, you'd find those freak people that were a combination of both, that had just natural kind of ungodly intelligence, plus they worked really hard. And that would just blow my mind how smart some of those people were. But my roommate in med school was one of them. It's just, seemed like an absolute genius. His ability to comprehend something so quickly just fascinated me. I sit there trying to go through it 10 times before I could master it.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, a combination like that, you got to be unstoppable.
Yeah. So I had never really run into people like that until med school, and you realize.
That's great, though. I always like to be with people that are smarter than me, because that means hopefully some of it rubs off on you.
Absolutely. I think it really, I guess, kind of makes you rise to that level. It's like you always want to be surrounding yourself with people that are a little better, that are a little more competitive. Because I really do think that it makes you better if you're surrounding yourself with those people. Yeah.
The key is just like being able to do that, but not let it get to you. That's like, oh man, I suck. You know what I mean? You gotta continue to be okay with it and improve. And So
is that why you do the podcast, or is that why I do the podcast?
I knew you were gonna come. I knew you were gonna make a joke about it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we both do it.
Yeah.
Maybe we both have different things that we both kind of.
That's what it is exactly. Cool. So your buddy Jim talked about going through med school, and there are the gates that you have to go through.
Yeah, lots of hoops.
Talk about the two most brutal gates you have to go through.
So I think the biggest hurdle is just getting in. I mean, I don't remember how many applicants there are, but I know there are schools that are getting 10,000 plus applications for class size of 200. So it's the bar to get in, I think, is the hardest. And so much so where I know that a lot of schools, having talked to people on the admissions side of things, that it's a very kind of rigid process. It's not like college where maybe they'll look past some grade issues. It's a very hard cutoff of it's this GPA, this MCAT score. If not, the application gets thrown away. I mean, it's not a maybe they can make up for it elsewhere. It's they're pretty hard cutoffs at certain points. So you've got to meet those kind of barriers to even have someone read your application. And then that is another kind of variable thing too, is that when someone reading your application, there could be several different people that could have gotten your application. So maybe to one of them, you were worthy of an interview, but to another person, maybe they read it and said, no, I had a stack of really good applicants today, and so this was the lesser of the two. So after you've kind of met that hard cutoff of MCAT GPA, the rest of the process can be, I think, a little bit objective. I mean, I don't have any subjective. I don't have a lot of personal experience in it, but from what was described to me it did seem a little kind of subjective after that point. So I think part of it is being qualified, but there is probably a little bit of luck on any given day on whether or not you get the interview. But the interview is the big barrier to getting into medical school. Once you get the interview, the pool's been narrowed down a lot. So I think the biggest thing there is just showing up and not being weird, just acting like a normal person. And I think you've got a pretty decent shot because at that level, you can imagine there are a lot of people that maybe don't have the most personal skills or, right. Maybe a little strange. So if you can get to that interview and kind of shine as a normal human being, I think you've got a pretty good shot of getting in. So I think that's probably the hardest hurdle is getting in. And one of the ER docs I work with as a scribe, he kind of described it best. He goes, once you get in, you're kind of in the club, you're in the system. It's like they put you on a conveyor belt and they spit you out 4 years later and you're a doctor. So it's like once you're in, they really want to keep you in. It's hard to fail out of med school, which is, I think, contrary to some people's beliefs, that it is very challenging. It's very hard in medical school, but it's they really make sure they invest so much into you, getting you there, that they're going to do all they can to keep you in school. So once you're there, it's hard to then drop out of that system because you've worked so hard to get there.
And they've invested some serious time in you as well to get you to that point.
Time and money into getting you there and sorting through the applicant, and having you come in for an interview and various things. So once you're there, they try to do the best to keep you there. But the next, I would say, I think biggest roadblock is two things. I mean, one would be step one exam. So the United States medical licensing exam, it's broken up into 4 parts. So there's step 1, there's 2 parts of step 2, and then there's step 3. And those are all like 7 to 8 hour tests. And you do step 1 after your second year. And that's kind of the separation between your classroom and you're in the hospital. So you finish all your basic science classes, you get out, you study for step 1. And then if you pass that, you then get to go into the hospital and start working, actually, pretending to be a doctor or learning how to be a doctor at that point. And the step 1 score also has a big impact on your residency choice. So just like the MCAT score, the step 1 score is used as a kind of a sorting tool for med students. It's one of the only really objective pieces of data that residencies have to compare apples to apples, because everything else is really kind of comparing apples to oranges at different medical schools.
Right.
So your MCAT's or your step 1 is your key to residency, and unfortunately, having a bad step 1 can really hinder getting into a residency program. Especially if you fail it, you can take it again, but that always follows you. So it's really you get one shot to do it right, and if you screw it up, it can really kind of have negative implications on your ability to get a residency. Which, if you can't get a residency, then you have kind of I hate to say it, but kind of a worthless degree. I mean, you're a doctor by definition, but you have no ability to do anything with a medical degree without residency training, at least in this country.
So now that you've described like all the stakes that ride on this, it was one exam.
Yeah.
Describe your life for the months leading up to it.
Yeah, I mean it's very stressful. I mean they try to make it not stressful, but there's really no way. When the stakes on this exam. I mean for most medical specialties, you don't have to like kill the test, but it's always in the back of your head. What if I choke? What if I have one bad day and I fail this test? And then it follows you forever. So, I mean, that was probably the single most intimidating test because, with the MCAT, you could take it more, and most schools just look at your best score. But this, no matter what you do that first test, they're going to see that first score.
It's brutal that they look, even if you fail, they look and look at that. Even if you come back and
right,
knock
even
it out
if
of
you
the
came
park.
back and knocked it out, you would still have kind of that failed step 1 on your record. So it was I mean, it was really intimidating. The school gave us, I think, 12 weeks, maybe not 12 weeks, maybe 2 months. They gave us a lot of time off to study. So the school knows obviously the importance of it. So and your first 2 years are kind of leading you up to that point to take that test. And then after the test was probably one of the best feelings in the world, but they make you wait 30 days to get your score back.
Oh.
So I know that we all went, like a group of my med school friends, we all went to Dominican Republic, like right after the test. We got on a plane, we went to Dominican for a week.
Yeah.
Forget about it. But of course, in the back of your mind, you're thinking like, oh man, like what am I going to do?
Did you guys like talk about answers and be like, what'd you say for this one?
Yeah, but you couldn't even remember. Like you kind of would, but there's so many questions on like an 8-hour, 7-hour test that like your brain is so fried after that. I couldn't remember a specific question on that test, and it was just terrible. I mean, it was terrible. Like, I would never want to go through that single experience again. And then you get your scores back, and it's like everyone gets the score on the same day. And I remember I couldn't even open it. I had to have my girlfriend at the time check it for me, like tell me if I did okay. And I ended up doing okay. I didn't kill it, but I did fine, just kind of what I was hoping to get.
Yeah.
So that was a huge relief. And then really after that, I mean, the rest of medical school was not quite as stressful.
So what are like the residencies that you'd have to crush it on the step 1 to be able to get into? Like, are there specialties that are much more coveted than others?
Well, I wouldn't say like necessarily coveted. I think everyone kind of goes in, you kind of self-select into what your specialty is. I mean, there's a lot of different personalities that go into different specialties. But I mean, notoriously, like, anything like in the surgical subspecialties is going to usually have a higher average MCAT score. So things like neurosurgery or orthopedics or ENT or plastic surgery, dermatology, things like that typically tend to have a higher average score, but also have a much smaller applicant pool. So I don't know if that's more of a self-selected thing or how that really plays out. But then it is true. I mean, a lot of programs do have a hard cutoff of MCAT or step 1 score. I mean, I know where I did residency, like our program director was very kind of open of we delete every applicant that has below this step 1 score
for like that particular specialty.
Yeah, for my specialty, like for where I did and where I went to residency.
And
yeah, so like where I went, when they get applications, they screen out anyone below a certain score, so they don't even read your application if you're below a certain score. So
wow.
It can be, pretty detrimental for people if you don't do great the first time.
And so where is like ER on the kind of the
you're
rankings? I'm really trying
to. Yeah.
It's probably in the middle. I mean, there's not like a hard list out there of like, this is your,
Did you want to say it's at the bottom? Is that what you were going for?
Well, I do wonder what is at the bottom. Is that weird?
Yeah.
But we're not going to say because he has med school friends that are doing that.
And
that's
part
true.
of it is, when you say like at the bottom, I think it's hard to say like, you look at a huge field out there like internal medicine, and there are programs that are less competitive, but then there are programs that are just as hard as any neurosurgery program to get into.
Right.
So within each specialty, there's a
also
huge
a band.
variability of competitiveness within the residencies, or at least perceived competitiveness.
When I say at the bottom, I mean at the bottom of an extremely accomplished set of students that has passed
Right.
this incredibly difficult exam.
And a totally subjective ranking system, right? I mean,
Right.
When you look at it's like college rankings, it's kind of similar to that. I mean, it's like just a perceived prestige at
it's
places,
humans with their biases and
but at that level, no matter where you go, you're still going to get great, you're going to get great training, and at the end of the day, you're still going to be a doctor in that specialty. So and no one ever asks you where you went to residency, which I think is really funny. Everyone says, where do you go to medical school? And I think people perceive your ability based on medical school, but I can tell you, medical school has zero to do, at least with what I do on a day-to-day basis. I learned almost nothing in medical school that is directly applicable to my daily practice of emergency medicine. I mean, the foundations, sure, but like where I went to medical school has no, I think, play on my ability as an ER doctor, which is I think interesting, because I think the lay person, they always want to know, well, where did you go to medical school?
But like going to a different residency can really change your level of training and caliber.
For sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So two quick things. Did you want him to say family medicine? Is that why you kept going there?
No, I do want to know. Sorry, no, you can do your second thing.
His med school buddies.
My really good friend, I was his best man. Yeah, he did he wants to do family medicine.
Yeah.
He when he was leading up to step 1, the reason I asked that question is he just didn't come out of his room for like,
Yeah.
Days at a time.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, it's like he had to take some time to re-socialize into the world.
Yeah,
like he
you
didn't
do.
know how to
Yep.
talk to people.
Yep.
Yeah.
You do. One of my friends, I remember specifically, he went to like his parents. They had like a condo at a beach, and he went there, and he didn't leave. And I think he said he ate like pizza every day, and he gained like 30 pounds during. So he came back and just looked like a different person. I mean, he was like 30 pounds heavier, had a huge beard. He just like, it was so funny, like seeing him pre-step one, post-step one.
Yeah.
And he did just fine step one. That plan worked itself.
Yeah. Oh, he killed it. Yeah. But yeah, he killed it. Nice.
Where did you do residency?
University of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you enjoy that experience?
I did, yeah, I loved it. Never, like, with the whole, I'm sure your buddies kind of explained to you, but the whole match process, it's kind of like, you apply to residency programs, and you apply broadly, because again, if you're going into a competitive specialty, and emergency medicine is generally, considered relatively competitive on the spectrum, so you apply all over the place. I mean, you apply, depending on how competitive an applicant you are, you're looking at double-digit applications to maybe even applying to like 100+ programs.
Holy cow!
And it's expensive. So more money you've got to borrow to do this, and then you've got to go to interviews. So same thing like with medical school. If you kind of meet their criteria, then they'll invite you out to interview. So if you've made the interview cut, then you've got a pretty good shot at maybe matching there. And I say the match because it's this really weird computer system. So after you've interviewed, and I think I went on 10 interviews, which you can imagine as a student living on student loans who has no income, the cost of this process is insanely expensive.
Yeah,
Like you
you
fly
fly.
around the country,
Oh.
stay in hotel rooms, none of it's subsidized. You're paying for all of it out of pocket. You do get a free dinner usually at the interview, which is nice.
nice of them,
but
sure.
yeah. And then lunch the next day, which is usually some kind of boxed lunch, but yeah, still free. And you go through the same process, but then at the end of it, you rank everywhere you interviewed. So like I think I interviewed at 10 places, so I ranked 1 through 10, and you submit it into this computer program, and the residencies do the same thing. They take everyone they interviewed and they rank them 1 through however many. They submit it into this computer program, and then it matches you. It's like almost like a dating thing. Like it matches you with your best fit. So you're highest. So if you rank somewhere number 1 and they put you number 1, you're going to match with them.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
But there's some weird algorithm that it uses to get people their match. And then I guess your friend's a third year.
Yeah, I think he's done.
He's done 30.
Yeah, he's done with it. He's interviews.
So he's interviewing.
interviews right
So
now.
he's got match
Yeah.
day coming up. So that's what I was going to say. Like he's probably getting ready. If it's February, he's probably already submitting his rank list pretty soon.
Oh boy.
And then you wait, and then you have match a day, and it's the same day, the same time for every fourth-year med student in the country. We got in a big auditorium, they poured champagne, and we all got an envelope, and in that envelope tells you where you're going to go for the next 3 to 7 years.
Was your girlfriend with you, or did you have to open that one?
Yeah. I think she was my fiance at the time,
nice.
fiance at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she was with me. My family, families are there. It's a huge celebration.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big party because it's literally it's a culmination of your entire medical school experience. So
Yeah,
it's you've made it. You essentially at this point are already cleared to graduate. I mean, you're essentially done at this point. And then everyone at the exact same time opens the envelope, and you find out where you're going for the next. So mine could have been one of 10 places, and
That's crazy.
Yeah, but luckily Pittsburgh was high up on my list, so I was
Yeah.
happy with that one. But,
Pittsburgh's a cool town too.
It was. I'd never been there before, but my wife and I, it's kind of in between our two families, and we thought
nice.
it'd be fun to go somewhere different for residency. And personally, like people wanted to go to like California and to the beach, and I'm like, you're gonna be working all the time. Why?
Right.
Yeah.
Why do I want to look out the hospital window and see a beautiful beach
That I can't go to
that I
ever.
can't enjoy?
Yeah.
Right.
Very cool. So, when Lindsay told me about your background and you would be a good guest on our podcast, I've been waiting. I thought of this question almost right away.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable sharing this, what's your craziest ER story?
Oh gosh, I can't think of like craziest because that could mean so many different things.
It's however you define it.
Like what is like the weirdest thing someone's put up their butt or like
Foreign
it's,
objects.
right.
We can go there. What is the weirdest thing?
I haven't personally seen anything too out of the ordinary. The normal stuff people would put in their butt.
What's
But,
the
what are
ordinary?
they-
yeah. But it is interesting people's excuse on they usually slipped and fell on it, which I think
Every
is kind
time.
of funny.
Sure,
yeah.
every time. Yeah.
I'm like, really? The shampoo bottle just happened to be sitting up perfectly straight, and you slipped right on it, and it just okay.
Oh God. So describe like a typical shift in ER.
All right, so it kind of varies depending on where I work, and it's actually kind of interesting because I'm actually working back in the same ER that I started out as a scribe in, a decade ago now.
Oh wow!
So I've been working some shifts down there, but it really does depend on where you work. If you're working, I work anywhere from inner city ERs, and I also work at a little rural ER. In the eastern part of the state, that's 8 beds, versus I work in a really big urban ER that has 42 beds. So my shift at the 8-bed ER might be I see a handful of patients and then I sleep for 3 hours, which is really nice. Versus in the urban ER, you've got ambulances coming in, you've got patients stacked in the hallways, you've got craziness, traumas coming in all night.
Yeah.
So it can really vary going in, but I think that's part of what I like about working in the ER is I'm kind of an ADD person in general. I like a lot going on. I like a lot of different stuff. And ER is kind of a hodgepodge of all the medical specialties.
Yeah.
I think I don't remember who described it as this, but they said, you essentially get, the most interesting 10 minutes of every medical specialty there is. But, it does have its downsides. I mean, you kind of are a jack of all, but master of none. So, you're not in any one area. You're always going to be reliant for certain emergencies on consultants. So, that can obviously be kind of a downside when you call a grumpy consultant at 3 a.m.
Right.
But in general, I like the variety. I like walking in and having no idea what I'm going to do that day. I think when I talk to people about it, that gives a lot of, your kind of, I guess, normal people anxiety that like to have, regimented days and schedules and know what they're going to be doing at work. But I kind of enjoy walking in and having not a clue what I'm going to do that day. So you just go in, you sit down at the computer, and you look and see who's waiting to be seen. You find out which, ambulances are on the way, and then you kind of prepare yourself for the night. And then once you kind of start, it doesn't stop. And then you look at the clock, and it's, been 10 hours, and your shift's over.
And you're exhausted, I imagine.
Yeah, usually pretty tired afterwards.
Yeah.
Dang. So your overall job is like to stabilize these people, and then like if someone comes in and they're gushing blood out of their eyeball, then you would like make sure that all the life-threatening stuff is handled, and then you call the ophthalmologist.
Essentially, yep. Yeah, any like
more.
life-threatening kind of stabilization we do, and then we either make the decision that is the patient sick enough they need to be admitted, or do they can they go home? And I think that's kind of the biggest part of the job in a sense is recognizing what is an emergency and what's not. So what can be dealt with in a week, what needs to be dealt with in 24 hours, and what needs to be dealt with at 2 a.m.
So go ahead.
Well, is that your job as the ER doc, or are there kind of gates before that? If somebody walks in, are there people that can kind of determine, oh, here's your level of how?
Yeah, there's a triage nurse. So the triage nurses are super valuable because they're going to screen every single person that walks in the door, and they're that first barrier of screening. And based on some criteria, they'll assign that patient a level. And that will, kind of key you in on, okay, who's, more serious and who's not. And then sometimes, can kind of determine your wait time too, which, can cause some problems when, someone in the waiting room sees someone, that gets taken right back, because from a layperson's perspective, they say, well, any other store you go to and, you get in line and the next person in line gets to go.
Right.
But when they see someone, bypassing them, it can create some problems.
Oh man,
But having a good triage nurse out front is crucial.
What's the lamest visit you've heard about into an ER, into one that you've worked at?
The lamest, I don't know. It's hard. There's quite a bit of lame ER visits, unfortunately. Ranging from and obviously I don't want to see every patient individually and trying to address their needs, but from a mentally I guess challenging standpoint, I mean there are certain visits that aren't very taxing mentally. If someone just comes in and wants a medication refill, there's not much time or thought that goes into that.
Because they can't wait?
Yep, it happens.
Wow.
Especially at 2 a.m. It happens.
That's a little nutty.
Yeah.
I have a lame one. I hit my head playing frisbee during a tournament, and we went to the emergency room. But like, there were more important people, so I had to wait for a while.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
You hit your head on what?
somebody else.
Someone else's head
it was
or
like
elbow or something?
just one of those collisions running past each other. But as far as the not lame ones, like when you were starting out your residency, I got to imagine that the amount of stimulus of all of this potential, like just intense gore or like injuries could be kind of a lot to take in. So was there kind of like a hardening process for your brain to be able to be more resilient to all that and handle all that under pressure?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you first kind of get exposed to things in medical school, third year of medical school, you rotate through every specialty. You get a little snapshot of every medical specialty out there to try to decide what you want to do. And I think you find you kind of gravitate to the ones that you like. So like some people, they go through the surgical rotation and they say, well, I love being in the operating room, I want to be a surgeon. And it's kind of the same thing with ER. It's like, well, I kind of got bored in the operating room, so I knew I didn't want to be a surgeon, and I didn't like seeing patients in the office because I got kind of bored sitting in an office all day, and didn't like doing that. So it kind of just all kind of culminated in in the ER as a little bit of everything. So I like that, but you do deal with some really awful things in the ER. So that's definitely one of the downsides of it. And I think when you first start doing it, it's hard to separate you're a human being from its work. I have a job to do, and I think as you progress through residency, you're able to kind of focus a little more and try to put my doctor hat on first. This is my job. I have a job to do for this person versus my human hat, where I'm thinking like, wow, that's somebody's mom, that's someone's dad, that's someone's grandmother. Because you can't really think like that, because it really kind of impacts what you're doing for that person. If that person needs something done emergently, life-saving, you've got to kind of put any of that kind of personal stuff out the door, which is why you can't really be effective treating your own family or friends, or because it's impossible to see them as a patient and not as that person that's your friend, or that person that's your family. You need to kind of focus on them as your patient, right, and what they need.
It seems like that would get in the way if you start thinking sentimentally about it.
Right. And of course, everyone's human, so you do, of course, that stuff crosses your mind. You've got to have really difficult conversations with families. You've got to break bad news to people. And you're a human. No one likes to do that. It's still probably the worst part of the job to have to sit down, tell some family that their family member just passed away. No one wants to do that part of the job. And I don't think when you envision picking your field of medicine that you don't really think about that side of it. And but pretty early on in training, they teach you how to do that and how to kind of internalize some of that stuff and kind of deal with it, and how to kind of move past it so it doesn't keep building up in you and affecting you personally.
Yeah. And ER docs probably have to share that horrible news probably more than any other.
Yeah, I would think so, and more than any other specialty, unfortunately. You do deal with death a lot. I mean, us and critical care docs probably, the most, as far as at least in the acute setting. But
right, which seems like it'd be worse, the acute or traumatic ones, as
right,
opposed to the longer cancer where they kind of know it's coming.
Right.
But one cool thing about it is that you basically spent 8-9 years of your life developing this set of superpowers that you have with you at all times. And I'm wondering, do people feel safer when you're around? They're like, oh, there's an ER doc here, we can go jump off that rock, whatever.
Well, I think it's probably a misconception. Everyone always is like on an airplane, for example, they say, oh, is there a doctor on the plane? I mean, I've never been in that situation, but I mean, I'm sorry, but when they just say the blanket term, is there a doctor on the plane? If there's a 20-year radiologist sitting in the back of the plane, probably not going to be able to help you too much.
Right.
Whereas I would take, the EMT any day over that. Yeah. So, I mean, depending on your specialty area, and in many of those situations, a nurse on the plane is going to be a better bet than some of the doctors that might, because, I would rather have the nurse making decisions than the orthodontist making, decisions if I'm having, a heart attack on an airplane.
Even though they're both technically doctors.
Well, if one person was a nurse versus the other was, maybe.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just using orthodontist as a random, not someone who deals with emergent conditions. Regularly, but if there's an ER nurse on the plane, I would want her, being there taking care of me.
So the question should be: is there a medical professional on the plane?
Yeah, or yeah, even someone, I guess, who's comfortable dealing with emergency medical conditions.
Yeah, there you go.
Because again, a good paramedic on the plane, like I would take that any day.
But you're kind of ideal. I mean, paramedic, EMT, nurse, but also ER doc would be like huge, right? On a plane for like the luck of the people.
Yeah,
on the
I
plane.
mean, I guess if you've got to have someone on there, it would probably would be my choice.
Yeah.
If I personally had to have an emergency on a plane, I would feel comfortable knowing that there was another ER doctor there, calling the shots.
But that's never happened to you in the wild.
No, I've never been in that situation. Of course, I get a lot of kind of curbside questions from friends and family, which I'm sure any physician does. But I think the biggest thing too, I think misconception is people feel, like you said, it's like oh there's a doctor here, like we're good, but it's like
Go do dumb things now. Yeah.
Right, without equipment, without it's like
Right.
sure I can tell you that something really bad is happening to you, but if I don't have the proper tools, I can't do anything about it. So it's not going to
Right.
really help anyone. The fact that you're sitting there with a doctor in the middle of wherever you are, the rural area.
Yeah.
If you get shot in the chest, you're still kind of SOL.
You can't just pull a bullet out and be like,
right, and
did
just put
it.
my finger in the hole and say, all right, you're good.
I'm a doctor. It's fine.
Right.
Does anybody have a napkin?
Yeah, get me the plastic kitchen utensils and we'll fix you right up.
Yeah. Tie the tourniquet and just suck the snake venom out. Spit
Right.
it out. Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that my buddy who went through med school did was this wilderness medicine trip. They went out in the woods and had a bunch of scenarios where one of them they would take turns being like an injured person, and it would be kind of like you say out in a rural area, and they'd have to figure it out with a limited set of tools with this small first aid kit. Have you ever messed around with that kind of medicine or?
A little bit. I mean, I did a wilderness medicine elective in medical school, similar thing where you go out and learn some kind of rural medical techniques. And I think it would be interesting to get a little more into. I mean, I'm a little involved in EMS in general. I'm the medical director for one of the local EMS agencies.
Nice.
Just kind of as a volunteer role, but I do enjoy. We did a lot of EMS stuff in residency, so part of our training was kind of talking about caring for someone in the austere environment. And one of my friends from residency actually went on and did a whole year fellowship out west in wilderness medicine, and he has some awesome stories and experiences. But as far as a career path, there's obviously not a lot of places in the country where you can find full-time employment as a wilderness medicine physician. I mean, a lot of
Right.
national parks need physicians on staff, so you can fit there. But it's kind of a niche. So you got to more of an I think at least in if you're going to be a wilderness medicine expert but live in Richmond, Virginia, it's more of an educational niche here than truly practical, I guess.
Yeah. It's it's more practical to be able to have all the facilities and tools and things that you
Right,
need. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So you're in your 30s now. Are you going to do ER medicine into your 60s?
I don't know if I'll make it through into my late 60s doing it. I mean, it is very demanding physically. So it's they say it's a young man's field, but it's there are plenty of docs that I work with that are in their 50s and they're still kind of chugging along. I think the parts of it that are nice are you do have shift work, so I know the exact hours I'm going to be working, and when I'm off, I'm off. So like other specialties that have patient I could pack up and work at any ER I wanted to. I don't have to worry about building a patient base. And then the same thing, I don't have patients emailing me, calling me, asking for medication refills, asking questions. It's when I walk in, I see the patients that come in the ER that day. When I go home that day, I go home and those patients follow up with their primary care doctors. I'm not following up with anybody. So it's plus and minus. I mean, some people don't like that. Some people want to build long-term relationships with people. I personally don't really want to do that just because I feel like when you do get to know someone really well, I think it can be hard to separate that, physician hat from, friend hat. I've been my patient for 20 years. So I don't really mind not having that continuity. And it is kind of nice to know that when you leave, when you're off, you're off.
Right.
So I know exactly when I'm not working, I'm not going to be working. So it's nice to schedule trips, vacations. I'm not going to get interrupted by work calls and patient calls and emergencies like that. And we never really have to be on call either, which I think is misconception. Is a lot of people think, oh, emergency medicine, you must work so much and be on call all the time. But we're never truly on call like another specialty is. We have kind of, they call them call days, but really it's just to be available if someone's sick that day. So I'm not getting called on my days off for questions or consultations or anything. It's strictly my shift. I work it, I go home, and I'm done. And I know my schedule a couple months in advance, so it's easy to plan things out. And as far as the medical field goes, we probably work some of the fewest hours out there. I know, for us, I mean, they consider full-time 30 hours a week. So, compared to some of the other specialists who spend their life working 60 hours a week, I can work 30 hours a week and still be full-time, have full-time benefits, and still have plenty of time off. But, you do need time to recover after shifts because they are very physically and mentally demanding. So, it does take some time to recover.
What are some of the physically demanding things, like walking around?
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially running the entire time.
Running.
Well, not running, but you're essentially just going from place to place your entire shift. So there's not much downtime. There's not much. I try to make a point now because, again, like you said, longevity is a concern. Can I do this forever? So I try to make a point every shift to walk out of the department for at least 10 minutes, no matter how busy it is. Just step out for 10 minutes, go grab like a snack or a coffee or something, and not think about medicine for 10 minutes. Just totally decompress and get out of the department. And it really helps me kind of refresh and reset, come back in, jump right back into it, and having that little kind of 10-minute, 15-minute mental break every shift really helps.
And I imagine there's like a ton of communication that has to happen between like getting the patients set up and rotating them out, and like you said, the triage nurse, but I imagine there's a lot of other kind of support staff or supporting cast that help out.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, the best way to describe it is kind of organized chaos. I mean, to any layperson walking into one of our busy ERs that I work at, it would just look like sheer chaos. I mean, there's so much happening. There's people doing a million different things at once. But there's kind of a beauty to it in a sense of seeing how well kind of organized the chaos can be to a certain extent. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can't really account for in a given day. You'd be at work and someone drops off a shooting victim out of their truck in front of the hospital entrance or things like that, or lady's baby is halfway out when she pulls up. But in general, we have a pretty good system of a charge nurse who is the one that's kind of, from a, I guess, administrative standpoint, is running the logistics of the ER. So and then there's nurses that are assigned to certain rooms and pods, and there's kind of a strategy on when certain beds open and when they close, and how quickly you bring them back and where we bring them back to. And we have some of the ERs are set up into different acuity levels where which zone that patient comes into.
And so there's this charge nurse who's like calling the shots, and then there are these like other, I guess, nurses that help set up the patient, and then there are some things that only an ER doc is able to do that nurses, for example, can't do, like in terms of actual procedures.
Right, yeah. So, the charge nurse is kind of looking at the logistics of the department, and, they're getting calls from EMS, they're looking at the waiting room, they're figuring out, we've got 2 ambulances coming in, we need to block these 2 rooms off, but we've got this really sick person in the waiting room, we need to get them back. So they're the ones that are kind of coordinating the front end process of getting people into the right place. And then when they get into the room, there's a dedicated nurse for that patient. So that nurse might have 4 rooms that she is kind of running and seeing the patients in. So they'll bring the patient back to the room. But then every patient ultimately has to get seen by either a doctor or a PA or a nurse practitioner. So we'll go in, spend the time with the patient, and come up with a treatment plan, put the plan in place, and the nurses are the ones that kind of carry out that plan in a sense. So we'll put in the orders for testing, for treatment, for things like that. And then the nurses are the ones that are, administering the medications and the treatments and doing things along those lines. And then there's ER techs that are typically usually nursing students or EMTs, and they're there to assist with those tasks as well. They're starting IVs, they're drawing blood, they're getting EKGs on patients. They're transporting patients around if they need to, and doing a lot of those kind of tasks that are super essential to getting that patient in and seen and treated effectively, because you're on a time clock with every patient that walks in the door, because there's more waiting for that room. So you want to give every patient their individual attention, but we need to have the things happen as quickly as possible. So getting all those labs sent and the urine sent and the testing done as fast as possible to get that patient kind of seen, diagnosed, and treated, and then disposed, because the ER is not the final landing ground for anybody. It's they got to come into that room, we've got to figure out what's going on with them, and then make a decision on, do they go upstairs, do they go to the OR, do they go home. So it all kind of happens quickly, but you can be managing a lot of patients at once. So if it's busy, you might have 10 active patients at one time that you're
man.
trying to juggle and bounce between, and then you're getting calls saying, oh, we've got a cardiac arrest coming in with CPR in progress, so you got to drop everything you're doing and run to that room. So it can get kind of hectic at times and feel a little overwhelming. But you've got a lot of people there that are awesome and doing their stuff to kind of keep it flowing.
Yeah, shout out to all those roles that you mentioned. Yeah, I see this billboard sometimes on the highway here. I can't remember what hospital it is, but it's got the little number on it for like average wait time.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys are like, let's get that wait time down?
It's a big administrative push, but I mean, in any, I don't want to go into too many details and get myself in trouble, but I mean, there's a hospital administrators and people who are very interested in those numbers and getting those metrics as good as they can be, that aren't necessarily realistic, I guess.
Yeah.
We get pushed from a lot of different directions to do things to improve certain metrics.
Yeah.
That aren't necessarily better for the patients, but they're better for rankings
the optics.
And the optics. Yeah. So
some people in medicine enjoy money, I think is what we're saying. Yeah.
And one of the older ER doctors, I kind of joke about it. He when he said I only like to look at hospitals that are ranked terribly. He was like, because I know I'm going to be able to actually go there and practice how I want to practice, and I'm not going to have someone breathing down my back the whole time that's concerned about my length of stays and my numbers. He's like, if I see that I'm about to go work at a hospital that brags about their high rankings, he's like, I know it's going to be a nightmare for me. He's
super
like,
anal retentive.
Right, I'm going to show up and they're going to be breathing down my throat to get my numbers better. And
that's genius.
Precious rankings.
The older guy has some wisdom.
Yeah,
there.
he did. He's like, at the time I was young. I was like, oh, that's silly. I was like, I want to work at the most prestigious hospital I can. But he's like, no. He's like, if I find one that's like ranked at the bottom, he's like, that's my favorite place to go.
That's beautiful. So
Nice.
when you say inner city, is that Richmond? Maybe?
Yeah, so I work around the city within the Bon Secours system.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess I can say that on the podcast.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're fine.
But yeah, so I work at various kind of hospitals in the Bon Secours system around Richmond.
So the protest or riots, depending on your political leaning, I guess, that happened back in the spring and early summer, was the ER experience different in the inner city back then?
During that, I didn't feel really any difference. I think we were a little kind of on edge, not knowing what could happen. But I had a few patients that were down there and involved in things, but nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, you're getting the bar fights and the assaults and everything, and this just happened to be in a different setting. But I'm sure from an EMS standpoint, their experience was quite different. But they have the advantage of seeing the patient at the scene, seeing what happened. When we see them all in the exact same, kind of blank, very generic colored room. And so we don't kind of really see the outside, what happened.
Why are the rooms so generic?
That's a great question. So I think there's been a big push lately to try to make ERs look a little more, homey. I mean, they just redid one of the floors in our ER.
A little more inviting.
It went from, that white sterile look to like a fake hardwood look. So you feel like you're in your living room,
Wow.
It's like, it's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, you maybe feel a little more at home. But I think at the end of the day, patients in the ER probably don't care too much.
Yeah.
They did a survey. What do you care what your doctor's wearing? Do you want them to wear a white coat, a suit, a tie, and they looked at the different medical specialties, and ER was like the bottom of like, we don't care what our ER doctor's wearing. Right. We just want to live. Like that's
That's
Yeah, I've learned
Glad
a
I
couple
asked
of
the
things.
question.
Yeah, I definitely don't want the person, if I go to the ER, to be somebody I know or who cares about me. And then
Right.
also, I don't care what they wear. They could be
Yeah.
wearing a hoodie, t-shirt, and jeans.
right, exactly.
As long as they're good at what they're
doesn't
doing,
matter.
yeah.
Yeah, you don't care. Which is nice wearing scrubs every day to work because I don't have to think about my outfit every day. I mean, my clothes cost is like almost nothing because I wear, I've got like the same exact pair of scrubs in like, eight sets of the exact same pair of scrubs. And I just rotate them out and wash them, and I wear the same thing to work every day.
It's like
I wish my life was that simple.
that's what Steve Jobs did. He just did the black shirt and the jeans.
Yeah,
but you
every
guys
day.
already have that for it. Yeah.
Yep.
Beautiful. So it is early 2021, and we are still in a pandemic, and you were an ER doc from the beginning. At what point did you realize we had a pandemic? When the government essentially declared it, or publicly it was being declared, or did you guys know that it was probably a problem before it was actually declared?
I mean, it was one of those things where it was almost kind of surreal at first, right? You were seeing it in other countries, and you're like, oh, that's Asia. That's never going to happen in this country. And then the first couple of cases started popping up, but everyone's like, oh, it's fine. They'll just be isolated. Like we're good. This is not going to happen. And I remember like even when it started getting really bad, we weren't affected in Virginia yet. We weren't one of the last ones, but we weren't one of the first hotspots. So I think when I started talking to some of my friends that do work in places like New York, that's when it kind of hit home as like, wow, this is a huge problem. We need to start preparing for it. But I don't think it was really challenging because no one, I think, has ever really thought about this before, or at least to this extent of how do we prepare it. I mean, every hospital has plans, disaster plans, but most of them have never actually been implemented before. And how are we going to do this when we have all these people to deal with? And knock on wood, we are not anywhere near some of the situations that were happening in New York. But I remember I personally took care of the first really sick COVID patient we had at our hospital system, and it was just like kind of mind blowing at seeing that and being kind of there and realizing how little we knew, and I mean how little we really still do know, but on how to care for those patients. And it's kind of been amazing at how quickly the medical community has come together. Really just the scientific community in general has come together to try to start really fighting this thing. And things that we thought may have been good then, we realize are not good now. Like a lot of things in medicine, things they did 20 years ago, we realized maybe we shouldn't be doing these things anymore. Right. But same thing with COVID. Some of the stuff we thought we needed to do early on, we realize now that it's kind of the opposite. So I think that was the biggest thing early on was the uncertainty of how bad can it get, and how do we care for these patients, because no one really knew what this thing was and what it was going to do to people. So it was really intimidating.
Yeah, as like a specific example, I remember at least the high profile one is the example of the ventilators and how like intubating people. At some point there was like a shift in the data or the opinion that like intubating and putting people on ventilators was actually not as a good of a treatment as like other ways. Did you notice that? Like
yeah. At first it was a push to we need to intubate them quick. You need to intubate them early. But like you said, that shifted pretty quickly. That was kind of one of the biggest things that was was changing, was that approach. But and they were coming up with all these new things about I thought these were kind of stupid from the beginning, but intubation boxes where you put the patient in this like plexiglass box and do the intubation in the box, and we got like 3 of them in RER really quickly, and like I never used the thing once because I was like, this is insane. But it was just this mass of like panic almost of like, what can we do to not get infected?
Right.
But I specifically remember looking at these boxes, and it's like it's still wide open on one end. So it's like, what is this intubation box actually accomplishing? I have no idea. But I think the scariest thing at the beginning was we didn't know how deadly this thing was. I mean, initially they were thinking the fatality rate was going to be much higher. So from a personal standpoint, you're seeing these patients, and we didn't have really good testing at first. So it was taking a week to get these results back early on. So you were just living every day having no idea, am I going to catch this? Am I going to come bring it home to my family? What do I even do? Do I go home and see my family? Do I quarantine myself at home? So many unanswered questions, and everybody I work with was going through the same thing, and we try to make light of it, but it was still a very scary thing to live through of not knowing, am I going to get this and die from it, or am I going to get this and give it to my parents or my wife, my kid, and how careful do I need to be? I mean,
especially a lot of the models, like the computer science database models that they built, were like extremely pessimistic, and because they didn't really factor in a lot of it's hard to factor a lot of things into just pure math, but there were models saying like 20 million people would die in the US, and like and of course the news is like, yo god, this is 20 million people might die, and so like reading that, I can't even imagine like being in that setting every day, like the potential risk of it.
And I think I felt somewhat, I mean, I wasn't as big on the doom and gloom as I think some people were, but just because we had seen, like, I think one of the first patients we saw and diagnosed had been abroad. So that was like our diagnostic criteria initially, was you had to have traveled abroad, because at that point, you can't get it in the country. Like, you can only get it from another country.
From China,
So they had to have traveled to even get tested. And this person came in just because they had traveled and had a runny nose. And I was like, this is so silly, but they were positive. They had it. And we called them thinking like, oh, surely they're going to get really sick. And we called them like when we got the test back a week later, and they were like, no, my runny nose went away. I feel great. I'm back to normal. And they're totally fine. So I was like, okay. So this thing definitely doesn't just ravage everyone from the beginning. But seeing the other side of it was really intimidating. I mean, seeing the people dying from it and how they were dying from it, which is what was so, I think, draining on the healthcare system, was how long these people stayed sick and on ventilators. They weren't getting better. They were on ventilators for weeks. So once one person went on a ventilator, you knew that if they were going to make it, they had a long hospitalization in front of them. And that's when resources, I think, kind of became a concern. But luckily, at least within the health system I'm working at, that was never, we never ran out of ventilators. I've never felt like we didn't have adequate PPE. I've always felt that we had the equipment that we needed when we needed it. The bed space is a little different situation. We have run out of beds several times. This second go round has actually been worse than the first go round.
Really?
In a different sense. I think the first go round was bad because of the uncertainty. That's what I think was killer with the first round is we just didn't know anything. So we were kind of just shooting blind with everything. The second round, I think we know a little bit more how to care for these patients and a little bit more on the prognostic side of things. But we have been very overwhelmed in certain times. Now, luckily, it's kind of been coming and going in waves and waxing and waning a little bit, so we've been able to recover. But there have been a couple times where the region in the Richmond area, from an EMS standpoint, we've been on a diversion status level where there were 5 ERs that were on complete EMS diversion, which means their hospital system was overwhelmed, their ER was overwhelmed, they couldn't take new patients because all their resources were stretched. So that gets a little intimidating when you've got 5 of the main hospitals in this region that are on EMS diversion.
That's like telling ambulances don't even come here.
Right, and it's a courtesy. So if it's in the patient's best interest, or if it's something life threatening, they can bypass that. But in general, typically it's saying we are too busy right now. We're too overwhelmed to take new patients right now.
And that doesn't happen right to that level.
No, it rarely happens. Rarely happens. So luckily, we were only in that for a brief period, and then we were able to rebound a little bit. But we've had plenty of days where it's the bed situation is real. So that's why I think with the first go round, that didn't happen around here because people were so terrified that they didn't go out. So our RER volume went down by 50%. So we were seeing half the patients we were seeing in the ER that time the year before because of COVID. And interestingly, our statistics of stroke, heart attack patients went down too. But obviously people aren't having fewer strokes and heart attacks. Right. They just weren't coming to the hospital. So people were sitting at home dealing with their stroke or chest pain or whatever, and not actually seeking medical attention, which was a huge issue, I think, the first go-around. The second go-around, I think some of the problem is that there are a lot of people that don't really care anymore and are not really paying attention. So I think that's what's led to us getting a little more overwhelmed, I think, the second go-around. But again, it's all, at least as of now, things seem to be, we're kind of managing it, and it's been okay. It's just been very busy and pretty hectic, and trying to kind of sort with where patients are going to go and getting the rooms figured out.
Yeah. Wow. And you got the vaccine, right? So
yeah, fully vaccinated.
There are 2 people in this house right now that have had the vaccine. My teacher aide wife got
nice.
Yesterday. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool. And you're talking. Nobody's really talking about the stats of the people that are no longer with us because they wouldn't go see the doctor or wouldn't go to the ER. I worked with a woman who was in her mid-40s in decent health, and she had some underlying issues that I think she probably had some symptoms of, and in normal times would have gone to see a doctor and did not, and she died in her home.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen a lot of it, a lot of EMS calls for cardiac arrest, and and unfortunately, hearing some of the stories of they've been having chest pain for a few days and didn't want to go to the hospital because they were scared of COVID, and unfortunately, I think that's, like you said, a statistic you really don't they don't talk about. And then the other side of that is, I think the other ill effect of COVID has been the loss of job, mental health issues, depression, substance abuse. That's the other thing that we've had a real issue with beds. I mean, there have been several times when every mental health bed in the state of Virginia has been occupied, so we couldn't find beds for patients. So they essentially have to sit in the ER sometimes for a couple days, getting their mental health care, but they're still obviously not ideal that they're having to sit in the ER. Right. But I think that's been a direct effect of job loss and things during COVID, and it's really had a bad effect on people from multiple angles.
How are you feeling about treatment for COVID these days? A lot more confident than you did, say, back in March and April?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's still no good silver bullet for it. I mean, there's no, good medication where you come in and we give you this medication and you get better and you're fine. There's a lot of experimental drugs. There's a lot of things out there that we're starting to realize, maybe do work. There's a lot of things that we realized that were popular early on that don't work at all. I think it's more so just getting comfortable knowing, I guess, kind of the natural progression of the disease. And I think what is most kind of mind-blowing is seeing some of these patients and their level of hypoxia or how low their oxygen levels are and how good they still look. Whereas as early on during COVID, these people were all getting put on ventilators because it was almost just mind-blowing how low their oxygen levels could be, but they're still just sitting there and look fine. Wow. But now we realize that's not the way to go with these people, and we have some other techniques to try to get their oxygen levels up before we just jump straight to intubation. And those have been pretty successful.
I've heard on the internet, and I'm not claiming this opinion, but that when people die, and everyone gets tested, and when people die, even if they die of like a traumatic injury or something that's obviously a cause of death, COVID is sometimes listed just in terms of records as like one of the causes, and then that number gets rolled up and then into the big number. Do you have any insight on that? Or
we're not trying to get you in trouble either.
Yeah, no, I people ask that too. They're like, oh, are they pressuring you to put COVID as a diagnosis? And like that's never been an issue. I mean, I've never had someone that's pressuring us to list COVID on there. I mean, I fill out, unfortunately my fair share of death certificates, and a lot of times we never test the patient for COVID. I mean, if they come in something totally unrelated, I didn't have a need to test them in the ER, so I don't put that on there unless it really was a COVID-related death. But there are a lot of people that have positive COVID tests and we don't know what to do with it. So that's kind of one of the challenging with the some of the mental health stuff is it's a requirement to before you get admitted for mental health is to get a negative COVID test. So initially those were taking 24 hours, 48 hours. So that was a huge delay getting someone the help they needed. And now, we don't really know what to do with these asymptomatic positive tests. Because we'll have a handful of patients, we test them, and sure enough, some of them come back positive.
And they're fine.
Never had symptoms, don't know what to make of it because, right now the recommendation is, you still want to quarantine from the date of that test, but people are testing positive, weeks and even months after they've had COVID. So even at the point where they would have been cleared to go back to work, they still have a positive test. So a lot of this mandating of negative tests before XYZ happens, I don't know if it makes as much sense. I mean, there's no other way to really go about doing it better now. But it is kind of hard for someone who is going to test positive for 6 weeks after they've had it, and they're going to have to carry that with them.
Wow.
If they're required to get that test again.
So people come to the ER for mental health, or is that just a separate example you were talking about?
Oh yeah, people come to the ER for mental health all the time. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of the gateway into kind of the mental health, treatment facilities. So someone comes in having a mental health crisis, they're usually referred into the ER. And then we have a really great system of mental health, kind of, I guess the best way to describe it is kind of mental health caseworkers that will help us coordinate getting that patient admitted and getting the mental health care that they need.
Do a lot of them get brought by family and friends, or do they show up of their own volition?
It's a combination of both. Some get brought in by family, friends. Some come in on their own. Some get brought in by law enforcement, not under their own will.
Right.
But yeah, they all, the kind of common ground is they all, come in, they get seen by an ER physician for medical clearance, and then we kind of help facilitate where they go from there.
Interesting.
So it really is kind of a catch-all. I mean, we see every spectrum of the medical field comes through the ER.
Yeah, your breadth is staggering what you deal with. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how do you think 2021 is going to play out as it relates to COVID? Not going to hold you to anything you say, but
I mean, I'm hopeful with the vaccines. I think it's going to be a big part on how effectively do we get this vaccine rolled out, and I think mostly for just the at-risk people. Let's get the people that have direct exposure to others. So I think getting healthcare workers. And then getting the high-risk people, the elderly, people with chronic medical conditions, getting them vaccinated. And I think at that point, we can start to at least feel a little bit of a relief, because at that point, COVID is still going to be with us. I don't think we're ever going to see COVID go away. I think it's going to become something that we deal with, that people have. And I look back at some of the other things that were a big deal at the time, like swine flu, right?
Right.
And that was the big news. And now no one talks about swine flu because most of the time we don't look for it. We have a generic flu test, and they test positive for the flu. You have the flu. But interestingly, when we started sending more kind of specific respiratory viral panels when all this started, and I saw cases of the swine flu in people that we never would have known otherwise had the swine flu. And I feel like I'm hoping we get to a point where COVID is just one of those things that, it is an illness that I don't know if it'll become seasonal or what it will play out as, but I'm hoping that that everyone will be able to get vaccinated, as much as needed. I don't think anyone knows how frequently that's going to have to be, but enough to keep the elderly, the at-risk folks safe and out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And the other people that get it, hopefully, it will be just like having a flu-like illness, and you'll recover from it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to ask about ER, Doc?
No, I've learned a stupid amount.
Yeah, so have I. This has been fantastic. We love to end, especially for people that are married with a kid or two, to talk about your family, how you met your wife, and tell us a little bit more about her and your son.
I met her at UVA. I was first year of medical school, and she was in her first year of grad school doing her master's for speech therapy. And we met in a bar, and then we just kind of talked after that, and then ended up dating. And I thought there's no way I'll end up with a girl from Ohio. There's no chance. And then of course we ended up getting married. And then she followed me to residency, so she obviously had to have a ring before she was going to commit to that. But when she knew that we were going to Pittsburgh, she was willing to quit her job, quit everything, and move up with me. So we had been long distance the 2 years prior to that. She had moved to Fredericksburg when she graduated, so we're kind of long distance for 2 years.
That's rough.
Yeah. But and then she quit everything, moved with me, got a new job in Pittsburgh. We loved it there. We had met a lot of really good lifelong friends that we still stay in touch with, and we're actually going on a trip with them in 2 weeks.
Nice.
Residency friends. Now that we're all vaccinated, we're like, well, we may as well
Why
kind of, do something social with each other.
Right.
So, and then residency, we didn't really want to have a kid, just with a crazy work schedule, working 60 to 80 hours a week and having no free time for 3 years wasn't great for a kid. So we waited till after residency to kind of consider that. And then we timed it, maybe not the most ideal, but it was kind of a whirlwind of, within 3 months we had moved states, both started new jobs, had a baby, bought a house, all within about a 3-month time frame. So it was a little overwhelming when we first moved back to Richmond.
But you're an ER doc. You're used to that kind of
thing. Right.
Yeah. You got to have at least a few things going on.
Yeah, I need something going on. If things get too steady and normal, I kind of freak out. I need something happening.
Well, very cool. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. I think we talked about a month ago, and you're like, yeah, I think I can do something into January. And Daniel and I were both very happy to have you on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks, Brandon. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe through whichever app you're using. To share your thoughts, head over to our website at podso1.io, and there you can comment on episodes or send us feedback directly. Thanks for listening.